Min Seon's penthouse office, late evening. Min Seon sits in his floor-to-ceiling glass office overlooking Seoul, expression carved from ice. Before him, projected on multiple screens, are 15 video profiles, daughters of politicians, celebrity socialites, heiresses, models. Each one carefully curated by his father's people for the upcoming merger. One by one, he swipes them away with barely a glance. Too eager. Too plastic. Too predictable. His father's voice crackles through the speaker. You need a public companion for the park industry's merger. Choose one. They're all the same, Min Seon responds, voice flat with boredom. His second-in-command tries again, pulling up 3 more profiles, a K-drama actress, a Olympic figure skater, a university professor. Min Seon doesn't even look up from the contract he's signing.
Swipe. Swipe. Swipe.
Sir, your father insists. Min Seon's eyes drift away from the profiles to the security feed wall, dozens of monitors showing his various business fronts. His gaze catches on one particular screen, a small art gallery in Insadong. There, a young black woman with natural curls kneels before a painting, completely absorbed. She's using a magnifying glass, checking brush strokes, oblivious to everything around her. No performance. No artifice. Just pure, focused intensity. She adjusts her glasses, makes a note, then smiles, not at anyone, but at the painting itself, as if she and the art are having a private conversation. Min Seon leans forward. Who is that? His associate checks the location tag. That's the Insadong gallery we acquired last month for the laundering operation, sir. She's nobody. Just the curator we inherited with the purchase. Min Seon's lips curve, not quite a smile, more like a predator spotting unexpected prey. Not nobody. Not anymore. He pauses the feed, zooming in on her face. What's her name? Ella Okonkwo, sir. British Nigerian. I want a full background by morning. Min Seon finally turns away from the 15 rejected profiles. And I want her contract restructured. She works for me now. The gallery door exploded inward at exactly 9:47 a.m., 3 federal agents cutting through Ella's carefully ordered world like a blade through silk. She'd been authenticating a Josian-era landscape, her magnifying glass hovering over brushstrokes that whispered secrets only she could hear, when the lead agent flashed his badge with all the warmth of a coroner's report. Ella Okonkwo. Step away from the artwork. The magnifying glass slipped from her fingers, clattering against the examination table. What's happening? This gallery is under investigation for money laundering. You're coming with us. The words didn't make sense. Couldn't make sense. Ella watched, numb, as agents in latex gloves began photographing her workspace, bagging her authentication logs, dismantling the sanctuary she'd built from nothing. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Grandmother's hospital, probably about the overdue payment, but an agent was already confiscating it, adding it to an evidence bag with bureaucratic efficiency. I want a lawyer, Ella managed, her voice barely audible over the blood roaring in her ears. Then you're going to need a very expensive one. The interrogation room smelled like industrial cleaner and desperation. 4 hours bled into the fluorescent lighting while 2 agents took turns dissecting her life. They spread documents across the metal table, authentication certificates bearing her signature, transaction records she'd never seen, gallery sales that looked legitimate until you followed the money into shell corporations and offshore accounts. These 5 paintings. The female agent tapped a manila folder. You authenticated all of them. They were sold for a combined total of 50 million won and used to clean funds for the Baekho syndicate. Ella's stomach dropped. Everyone in Seoul knew that name, even if they pretended not to. I authenticated the art, not the transactions. I had no idea. Your signature says otherwise. The male agent leaned forward, his tie slightly loosened from hours of interrogation. Money laundering charges carry 5 to 10 years, Miss Okonkwo. Unless you're willing to testify against the gallery's ownership. I don't know anything about the owners. I was just hired to, her voice cracked. Please, my grandmother. She needs me. She's in the hospital. Then you should have been more careful about who you worked for. They released her at sunset with a court summons and a seizure notice. The gallery, locked and tagged with federal tape. Her reputation, destroyed before she could even mount a defense. Her phone, finally returned, filled with messages from the hospital about her grandmother's deteriorating condition and mounting bills. Ella sat in her grandmother's hospital room that night, holding a hand that felt too fragile, watching machines measure out heartbeats that cost money she no longer had. She'd cried in the taxi. Now she just felt hollow, scraped clean of everything except the crushing weight of failure. The knock came quietly, almost polite. He entered like he owned the air itself, suit tailored to perfection, dark hair styled with casual precision, eyes that assessed and cataloged everything in 3 seconds flat. 2 men in expensive watches waited in the hallway, hands clasped, faces blank. Miss Okonkwo. His voice carried the smooth danger of deep water. My name is Min Seon. Ella's breath stopped. She knew that name too. Knew it the way you know about lightning before thunder, inevitable and terrifying. I own the gallery where you worked. He sat without invitation, producing a leather portfolio with movements so controlled they seemed choreographed. And unfortunately for you, I own your problem. You're the one who... Anger flared through her exhaustion. You destroyed my life. I provided you employment. He opened the portfolio, removing a document that looked nothing like the gallery contract she'd signed months ago. What happens next is entirely your choice. Option 1. Face prosecution. Watch your grandmother lose her medical care, spend the next 5 years in prison explaining how you didn't notice 50 million one passing through your authentication logs. He slid the new contract across her grandmother's bedside table, the paper whispering against cheap laminate. Option 2. 6 months as my companion. Public events, social obligations, complete cooperation. In exchange, your legal troubles disappear. Your grandmother's care continues indefinitely. His finger tapped the signature line. I even restore your precious reputation. Ella stared at the contract, her vision blurring. This is blackmail. This is business. No emotion touched his perfect features. You have 30 seconds to decide. Her grandmother stirred in sleep, the ventilator hissing its mechanical rhythm. Ella thought about prison orange, about funeral costs, about the judge's face when she tried to explain that she'd just been doing her job, just trying to survive. The pen felt like a weapon in her shaking hand. What's the fine print? She whispered. Min Seon's smile was a beautiful, terrible thing. Does it matter? It didn't. They both knew it didn't. Ella signed her name in strokes that felt like surrender, and Min Seon's expression shifted into something almost resembling satisfaction. He collected the contract with the care of a man who'd just acquired something valuable, then stood with fluid grace. A car will collect you tomorrow at noon. Bring nothing you're not prepared to lose. He paused at the door, glancing back with eyes that reflected no light. Welcome to your new life, Miss Okonkwo. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded exactly like a trap snapping shut. The black Mercedes arrived at exactly noon, idling outside her grandmother's hospital with the patient menace of a predator. Ella had spent the night in the vinyl chair beside her grandmother's bed, unable to sleep, unable to think beyond the contract she'd signed in desperation. The driver didn't speak, simply opened the rear door and waited with the blank professionalism of someone paid extremely well to see nothing. Inside the car, garment bags hung like expensive ghosts. Ella unzipped one with trembling fingers, designer labels she'd only seen in magazines, silk that whispered against her skin, a deep emerald dress that probably cost more than 3 months of her former salary. A small card nestled among the tissue paper, Min Seon's handwriting sharp and precise, where the green. Burn everything else you own. She clutched her worn canvas bag tighter, the few possessions she'd grabbed from her apartment suddenly feeling like relics from someone else's life. The penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of Gangnam's most exclusive tower, all glass and steel and cold perfection. Ella stepped from the private elevator into a space that felt more like an art installation than a home. Minimalist furniture in shades of black and white, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's glittering sprawl, Not a single personal photograph or splash of color to suggest a human actually lived here. Even the air felt expensive, filtered and climate-controlled to an uncomfortable precision. Min Seon stood at the window wall, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Korean that shifted seamlessly into Mandarin mid-sentence. He wore different clothes than last night, but the same aura of absolute control. He didn't turn when she entered, simply raised one finger. Wait. Ella waited, her canvas bag suddenly feeling like a child's security blanket. He ended the call with a curt phrase and finally faced her, eyes traveling over her rumpled clothes with the clinical assessment of someone evaluating merchandise. You look exhausted. I didn't sleep. That won't be acceptable going forward. He gestured to a leather folder on the glass coffee table. Your schedule. Your wardrobe has been delivered to your room. Study both. My room. Something cold settled in Ella's chest. I thought this was about public appearances. Public appearances require preparation. You'll live here for the duration of our arrangement. He crossed to a bar cart, pouring himself 2 fingers of amber liquid despite the early hour. The rules are simple, Miss Okonkwo. In public, you are charming, obedient, and appropriately affectionate. You do not contradict me. You do not leave my side without permission. You smile when required. Ella's fingers tightened on her bag strap. And in private? In private, you remain available. His tone suggested he was discussing weather patterns. I may have business associates to entertain. Calls to take at any hour. You will not disturb my sleep, ask questions about my work, or attempt to contact anyone from your former life without approval. That's not. She forced herself to breathe. The contract didn't say anything about living here, about being available every hour. I thought. You thought incorrectly. Min Seon finally looked at her directly, and the flatness in his gaze made her step back involuntarily. You signed a contract without reading it. That's not my problem, it's yours. Would you like me to review the clauses you missed? Section 7, subsection 3. The companion agrees to maintain residence at a location designated by the primary party. Section 12. Complete discretion and availability are mandatory conditions of this agreement. I had 30 seconds. The words burst out before she could stop them. You gave me 30 seconds while my grandmother was dying in the next room, and you made your choice. He set down his glass with a soft click. If you'd like to renegotiate, I can have my lawyers call the prosecutors. I'm sure they'd be delighted to hear you've changed your mind. The threat hung between them like a blade. Ella's nails bit into her palms. What if I have boundaries? Things I'm not willing to do. Then you should have established them before signing. But something shifted in his expression, a flicker of something that might have been amusement or might have been cruelty. Your room is the second door on the left. Your wardrobe has been selected by my stylist. Wear what's laid out on the bed. For what? Our first event is tonight. A charity gala at the Shilla, politicians, business leaders, the kind of people who pretend their money is clean. He returned to his position at the window, dismissing her with his posture. You'll smile. You'll look beautiful on my arm. You'll make them believe we're a legitimate couple. I don't know how to. Then learn quickly. His reflection in the glass was cold and perfect. The car leaves at 7. Don't embarrass me, Miss Okonkwo. The consequences of failure would be uncomfortable for both of us. Ella stood frozen, canvas bag clutched against her chest like armor, staring at the man who now owned the next 6 months of her life. The Seoul skyline glittered behind him, 1,000 lights in a city that suddenly felt very far from the gallery, where she'd authenticated paintings and dreamed of simpler things. Where's my room? Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Min Seon didn't turn. Second door on the left. Don't keep me waiting tonight. She walked down the hallway on legs that felt borrowed, pushed open the second door, and found a bedroom 3 times the size of her old apartment. The emerald dress lay spread across a bed that looked like it had never been slept in, and beside it, diamond earrings that caught the light like tears. Ella closed the door and finally let herself cry. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe to Mystic Tale by Luna and comment where you're watching from. The Shilla Hotel ballroom dripped with old money and new blood, crystal chandeliers casting flattering shadows over faces Ella recognized from news headlines and federal watch lists. She'd seen the guest list during her frantic afternoon preparation. Tech moguls with patent theft allegations, real estate developers with convenient zoning board connections, pharmaceutical executives whose clinical trials had suspiciously favorable outcomes. Everyone wore their crimes like couture, elegant and untouchable. Min Seon's hand rested at the small of her back, possessive and warm through the silk of her emerald dress. He'd barely looked at her during the car ride, scrolling through his phone with the detached focus of a surgeon reviewing charts, but the moment they'd stepped into the lobby, his entire demeanor had shifted. Now he smiled at her like she was precious, his thumb tracing small circles against her spine that made her skin prickle with unwanted awareness. "Smile," he murmured near her ear, the words soft enough to sound affectionate to observers. "You look terrified." "I am terrified," Ella whispered back, maintaining her frozen smile as a photographer's flash went off. "Good. Fear keeps you cautious." His hand pressed slightly firmer. "But tonight you're madly in love with me. Try to look the part." They moved through the crowd like royalty, Min Seon exchanging greetings in 3 languages, his charm deployed with surgical precision. Ella watched him transform for each conversation, deferential with the elderly chairman of a shipping conglomerate, ruthlessly witty with a group of venture capitalists, coldly professional with a man whose diamond cufflinks probably cost more than her grandmother's medical debt. Each version of him felt authentic and completely false simultaneously. "And who is this lovely creature?" A woman in Chanel approached, her smile sharp enough to cut. "Min Seon, you've been holding out on us." "Mrs. Park." Min Seon's hand slid to Ella's waist, pulling her closer. "May I introduce Ella Okonkwo?" "Ella, Mrs. Park owns half the art galleries in Seoul." The irony wasn't lost on Ella. She extended her hand. "It's a pleasure." British accent, Nigerian heritage, art background. Mrs. Park's handshake was brief and calculating. "How eclectic. Tell me, dear, how did you meet our most eligible bachelor?" Before Ella could stumble through a response, Min Seon answered smoothly. "She was authenticating a piece I acquired. One look and I knew I had to have her." His eyes met Ella's, and the possessiveness there felt dangerously real. "Some things are worth breaking your own rules for." Mrs. Park's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. "How romantic. I give it 3 months." They continued their performance for another hour, Min Seon introducing her to men who smiled with too many teeth and women who looked at her like she was an amusing temporary fixture. Ella's cheeks hurt from smiling, her feet ached in borrowed Louboutins, and she'd lost count of how many times she'd been asked intrusive questions about their relationship that Min Seon deflected with practiced ease. She was reaching for a glass of champagne when a hand closed around her wrist. "Miss Okonkwo." The man was younger than most of the crowd, sharp-featured with a smile that didn't reach his calculating eyes. "I don't believe we've been introduced." "Kang Ji-hoon." Ella tried to pull her wrist back gently. "I'm here with Min Seon. Yes, I saw." His grip tightened fractionally. "Beautiful girl like you. I hope he's treating you well." His track record with companions is concerning. Women seemed to disappear from his life, quite suddenly. The threat beneath the polite words made her blood ice over. "I don't know what you, Ji-hoon." Min Seon's voice cut through the ambient noise like a blade through silk. He appeared at Ella's side with frightening speed, his hand closing over the man's wrist with enough pressure that Ji-hoon's smile finally cracked. "Remove your hand from what belongs to me. Just making conversation." But Ji-hoon released her, stepping back with hands raised in mock surrender. "Your new pet is quite charming." "She's not a pet." Min Seon's tone remained pleasant, but something deadly flickered in his eyes. "And if I hear you've spoken to her again without my explicit permission, they'll find what's left of you in pieces across 3 districts." The words were delivered with the casual warmth of someone discussing dinner plans. Several nearby conversations faltered, then resumed with forced brightness. Ji-hoon's smile turned vicious. "Territorial already? That's new. Usually you share." Min Seon moved with liquid grace, stepping into Ji-hoon's space until their faces were inches apart. His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than shouting. Touch her again, and I'll make sure your father receives every detail of your Busan operation. All 15 shipping containers. All 37 names. I wonder how the chairman would react to learning his son is stealing from him. The color drained from Ji-hoon's face. He stepped back, smoothing his jacket with shaking hands. My apologies. I meant no disrespect. You meant exactly that. Min Seon's hand found Ella's waist again, pulling her against his side. But I'm feeling generous tonight. Disappear before I change my mind. Ji-hoon melted into the crowd like a ghost. Ella's heart hammered against her ribs, her earlier champagne threatening to make a reappearance. What just? Not here. Min Seon guided her toward the balcony, his pleasant expression never wavering even as his fingers pressed hard enough against her side to bruise. Smile and walk. We're leaving. The night air hit her like a slap when they stepped outside, Seoul's lights blurring through unshed tears she refused to acknowledge. Min Seon released her immediately, pulling out his phone to text rapid instructions to his driver. That man, Ella managed, her voice shaking. He threatened me? Yes. And you threatened to kill him, and she couldn't finish the sentence. Min Seon finally looked at her, and his expression held no warmth whatsoever. Did you think this was a game? That signing my contract meant attending parties and wearing nice dresses? He stepped closer, backing her against the balcony railing. You're in my world now, Miss Okonkwo. And in my world, people like Ji-hoon see vulnerability as opportunity. They'll use you to get to me, or destroy you, for entertainment. I didn't ask for this. You signed for it. His hand cupped her jaw, forcing her to meet his eyes. So, here's another rule. You don't leave my sight at public events. You don't accept drinks from anyone but me. You don't engage in conversation without my approval, because the next person who touches you might not stop at threats. Ella jerked her face away from his grip. I'm not your property. For the next 6 months, you are exactly that. He released her, adjusting his cufflinks with practiced precision. The car is here. We're done performing for night. As he guided her back through the ballroom toward the exit, Ella caught Ji-hoon watching them from across the room, his expression promising future retribution. Min Seon's hand remained steady at her back, protective and imprisoning in equal measure. She'd thought she understood what she'd signed. She'd been catastrophically wrong. The penthouse felt colder than when they'd left, or maybe that was just Ella's perception as Min Seon poured himself whiskey with movements that seemed too controlled, too deliberate. He'd been silent during the entire car ride, staring out the window at Seoul's neon blur while Ella's mind replayed Ji-hoon's threats and Min Seon's casual promise of dismemberment. She kicked off the Louboutins the moment they crossed the threshold, her feet screaming relief. I need to check on my grandmother. Already done. My people confirmed her vitals stabilized this evening. Min Seon didn't turn from the bar. She's comfortable. I'd like to hear it from her doctors myself. Tomorrow. He finally faced her, loosening his tie with one hand. Tonight we need to discuss the full scope of our arrangement. Something in his tone made Ella's stomach clench. We already discussed it. Public appearances, living here, being available for physical intimacy. He said it like he was ordering coffee. That's also part of the contract. The words took a moment to register, and when they did, Ella felt the floor tilt beneath her bare feet. Excuse me? Section 9, subsection 2. Min Seon set down his glass, moving toward her with predatory grace. The companion agrees to provide complete companionship, including but not limited to physical affection as required by social circumstances and private arrangement. That's prostitution. Heat flooded Ella's cheeks. I thought this was about appearances, about playing a role in public. Public and private are not separable in my world. He stopped a few feet away, studying her like she was a puzzle he'd already solved. People talk. Staff gossip. If we're not convincing behind closed doors, we won't be convincing in ballrooms.
No.
Ella backed toward the hallway, her heart hammering. I didn't sign up for this. I won't. You did sign up for this. Your signature is legally binding. His voice remained maddeningly calm. But I'm not a monster, Miss Okonkwo. I won't force you. I'll simply call my lawyers and reinstate the federal charges. Your choice. The trap snapped shut again, just like in the hospital room. Ella's nails dug into her palms hard enough to leave crescents. You're sick. I'm practical. Min Seon closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hand catching her chin with surprising gentleness. And you're beautiful when you're angry. All that fire barely contained. His thumb traced her lower lip and Ella froze, caught between revulsion and a traitorous flutter of something she refused to name. Up close, she could see the perfect architecture of his face, smell his cologne, something dark and expensive, feel the heat radiating from his body. One kiss, he murmured, his eyes locked on her mouth. Let's see if you're as untouchable as you pretend. Before she could protest, his lips met hers, firm and commanding, tasting like whiskey and control. Ella's hands came up to push him away, but he caught her wrists, pinning them gently against his chest as he deepened the kiss. For a moment, her traitorous body responded, lips parting despite every screaming instinct to fight. Then, everything changed. Min Seon went rigid against her, his grip on her wrists tightening painfully. His lips stilled, and when Ella's eyes flew open, she found him staring past her at something she couldn't see. His pupils had blown wide, swallowing the dark of his irises, and his breathing turned shallow and rapid. Min Seon? Her voice came out wrong, frightened. He released her so abruptly, she stumbled backward. His hands trembled as they rose to his temples, fingers pressing hard against his skull. When he spoke, his voice had changed completely, higher, younger, cracking with terror that didn't belong in a grown man's throat. Iyama, please don't leave me. The Korean spilled out in a child's cadence, desperate and broken. There's so much blood. Iyama, wake up. Please wake up. Ella's breath caught in her chest. This wasn't manipulation or cruelty. This was something fracturing in real time. Min Seon's eyes remained open but unseeing, locked on a horror only he could perceive. He backed away from her until his shoulders hit the window, then slid down the glass to the floor, knees drawn up like a child trying to make himself small. His expensive suit crumpled, his perfect composure shattered into jagged pieces. He's still here, Min Seon whispered, and now he was looking directly at Ella, but clearly seeing someone else. Appa's still here.
He's washing his hands.
Why is he washing his hands, Iyama? Why won't you answer? The raw anguish in his voice made Ella's throat close. She knelt slowly, instinct overriding fear, reaching toward him with a shaking hand. Min Seon, you're safe. You're in your home. Whatever you're seeing isn't. Don't touch me. He recoiled violently, his head cracking against the window hard enough to make Ella wince. The blood gets on everything. It won't come off. I've tried so hard, but it won't. His words dissolved into Korean too rapid for Ella to follow, punctuated by breathing that sounded like drowning. She'd seen trauma before, read about PTSD in textbooks, but watching it consume someone in real time was visceral and terrifying in ways no clinical description had prepared her for. Minutes crawled past. Maybe 5, maybe 20. Ella stayed frozen on the floor, afraid to move, afraid to leave, afraid of what he might do if she tried to touch him again. Eventually, his breathing slowed. The trembling in his hands subsided. His eyes refocused gradually, awareness seeping back like water through cracks. When Min Seon finally looked at her, really looked at her, his expression cycled through confusion, recognition, then something that might have been horror. You're still here. His voice had returned to normal, but it carried a weight that hadn't been there before. Ella nodded, not trusting her voice. Min Seon pushed himself to standing with movements that seemed to cost him everything, his perfect composure reassembling itself piece by careful piece. He wouldn't meet her eyes. Go to your room. What just happened?
Go to your
room. Each word fell like a stone. And forget what you saw. That's an order, Miss Okonkwo. But they both knew forgetting was impossible. Ella had just seen behind the monster's mask, and what she'd found there was infinitely more complicated than she'd been prepared for. Ella woke to the weight of a gaze on her skin, that primal instinct that jerks you from sleep when you're being watched. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the pre-dawn gray filtering through unfamiliar windows, and found Min Seon sitting in the chair across from her bed, still wearing last night's rumpled suit, staring at her like she was a ghost he couldn't quite believe in. "You stayed." His voice came out hoarse, disbelieving. "You're still here." Ella pushed herself upright, suddenly aware she was still in the emerald dress, wrinkled and twisted from sleeping in it. She'd meant to change after he dismissed her, but instead she'd collapsed onto the bed and succumbed to exhaustion so complete it felt like drowning. "Where else would I go?" "Away." He said it simply, factually, like it was the only logical response. "Everyone goes away." His eyes were bloodshot, face pale beneath his naturally warm complexion, and she realized with a start that he probably hadn't slept at all. He'd been sitting there for hours, watching her breathe, trying to process the impossible fact of her continued presence. "I signed a contract," Ella said carefully, pulling the duvet higher, even though she was fully clothed. 6 months. "I can't exactly leave." Something flickered across his face. Disappointment, maybe, or recognition of a truth he'd been avoiding. The contract has an escape clause. Section 21. If either party experiences severe psychological distress, termination is permitted with 48 hours' notice. "I didn't know that." "Now you do." He stood abruptly, crossing to the window, putting distance between them like she was something that might contaminate him. "After last night, you're entitled to invoke it. My lawyers will process the paperwork by this afternoon. Your grandmother's care will continue for 12 months as severance. You'll sign an NDA and walk away." Ella studied his rigid shoulders, the careful way he kept his back to her. "Is that what you want?" "What I want is irrelevant." His reflection in the window was harsh in the growing light. "What I want is for you to have not witnessed what you witnessed. But since that's impossible, the next best option is your immediate departure." "Because I saw you have a panic attack?" "Don't." The word cracked like a whip. Min Seon spun to face her, and the vulnerability from last night had vanished, replaced by something cold and cutting. "Don't reduce it to clinical terms. Don't try to understand it. Just take the out I'm offering and leave before." "Before what?" Ella interrupted, surprising herself with her own boldness. "Before I see it again? Before I realize you're human?" His laugh was ugly and sharp. "Human? Is that what you think you saw? I'm not human, Miss Okonkwo. I'm a defect. A malfunctioning piece of machinery wrapped in expensive suits." He moved toward her with predatory speed, looming over the bed. "Get out of my house. Get out before I do something we'll both regret." "You're trying to scare me away." "I'm trying to save you from making a catastrophic mistake." But his hands were shaking again, barely perceptible tremors he couldn't quite control. "No one stays. No one should stay. There's a reason for that." Ella met his eyes, seeing the desperation beneath the anger. "What if I want to stay?" "Then you're more damaged than I am." He turned away sharply, heading for the door.
"Get dressed."
"My assistant will brief you on the actual terms of our arrangement. All of them. Then you can make an informed decision about whether your grandmother's life is worth 6 months in hell." The door slammed behind him with enough force to rattle the frame. Ella sat in the wreckage of the conversation, her heart racing, trying to process what had just happened. She'd expected anger, maybe threats. She hadn't expected him to offer her freedom. Hadn't expected to see fear in his eyes when he looked at her. An hour later, a woman in her 40s appeared at Ella's door with coffee and a tablet. "Miss Okonkwo. I'm Park Ji-woo, Mr. Min's personal assistant." Her English was perfect, her expression carefully neutral. "He's asked me to provide additional context regarding last night's incident." They sat in the expansive living room, morning sun now flooding the space with light that felt inappropriate for the conversation. Ji-woo pulled up files on her tablet with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. "You're the 4th woman in 3 years to witness one of his episodes," Ji-woo said without preamble. "The first one called the police. thinking he was having a psychotic break. The second locked herself in the bathroom and refused to come out until security escorted her away. The third. She paused delicately. The third tried to use what she saw as leverage. She's currently bound by legal agreements so comprehensive she can't even mention his name in public. And now me, Ella said quietly. And now you. Jiwoo studied her with something that might have been curiosity. He's never offered the escape clause before. Usually he pays them off immediately, has lawyers scrambling to bury everything before sunrise. The fact that he gave you the option to choose. She trailed off meaningfully. What triggers it? Ella found herself asking. The episodes. Jiwoo's expression softened fractionally. I'm not qualified to discuss his medical history. But if you're genuinely considering staying, you should understand what you're signing up for. It's not just panic attacks, Miss Okonkwo. It's night terrors, dissociative episodes, moments where he's not himself at all. And he has no control over when they happen. After Jiwoo left, Ella spent the day researching on her phone. PTSD, complex trauma, dissociative disorders triggered by severe childhood experiences. She read clinical papers and survivor forums, trying to match what she'd witnessed to diagnostic criteria, trying to understand the man who'd threatened to dismember someone for touching her and then dissolved into a terrified child within hours. The sun was setting when she finally found Min Seon in his home office, staring at contracts he clearly wasn't reading. I'm staying, Ella said from the doorway. His head snapped up, eyes widening fractionally before his mask slammed back into place. You're making a mistake. Maybe. She stepped into the room, her decision crystallizing with each word. But it's my mistake to make. 6 months. That was the deal. The deal changed when you saw. Nothing changed. Ella surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. You're still blackmailing me. I'm still trapped. The only difference is now I know you're not the monster you pretend to be. Min Seon stood slowly, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely uncertain. I am exactly the monster I pretend to be. Last night was an aberration, not a revelation. Then prove it, Ella challenged. 6 months. Let's see who's right. He stared at her for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind his eyes. Finally, he nodded once, sharp and final. Don't say I didn't warn you, Miss Okonkwo. The message arrived 3 days into their carefully orchestrated détente, sliding into Ella's phone at 2:47 a.m. while she lay awake listening to the penthouse's expensive silence. No number, no name, just an image that loaded slowly enough to build dread in her chest before the full horror materialized on her screen. A woman in a hospital bed, eyes open but vacant, staring at nothing with the hollow expression of someone whose mind had simply stopped processing reality. She was young, maybe late 20s, within 4 lines snaking into her arm and restraints at her wrists, soft medical restraints, the kind used when patients might hurt themselves. Her hair was matted, her hospital gown twisted, and there was something fundamentally broken in the empty way she breathed. The text followed seconds later. You're not the first. Run while you can. Then a second message. Ask him about Yoon Mi-ra. Ask him what he did to her. Ella's hands shook as she screenshotted the messages before they could disappear, though some instinct told her they wouldn't. Whoever sent this wanted her to see, wanted her to know, wanted her terrified. She spent the remaining hours until dawn researching the name, finding only sparse information, a missing person report from 18 months ago, quickly closed with no details. A society girl from old money who'd vanished from public life after briefly being photographed with Min Seon at a charity function. By the time gray light crept through her windows, Ella had made a decision that felt equal parts brave and catastrophically stupid. She found Min Seon in his home gym, shirtless and destroying a punching bag with methodical precision. Sweat gleamed on his skin, each impact precise and controlled, and she realized this was how he managed whatever demons haunted him. Through violence he could direct, control, contain. He didn't acknowledge her presence, but his shoulders tensed fractionally. Who is Yoon Mi-ra? Ella asked without preamble. The punching bag swung wild as Min Seon's fist connected with enough force to send it careening. He caught it on the backswing, steadying it with both hands, breathing hard. When he finally turned to face her, his expression was carefully blank. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe to Mystic Tale by Luna and comment where you're watching from. Where did you hear that name? Ella held up her phone, showing him the messages, the photograph. Someone wants me to know what you're capable of. They want me to run. Min Seon studied the screen for a long moment, something dark and complicated moving behind his eyes. Then he grabbed a towel, wiping sweat from his face with deliberate slowness, buying time or composing his response or both. Did you research her? Missing person report. Closed case. No details. She's not missing. He moved past Ella to the water station, downing half a bottle before continuing. She's in a private psychiatric facility in Jeju. Has been for 16 months. Her family pays for the best care money can buy, and in exchange, they don't ask questions. The clinical delivery made it somehow worse. What happened to her? She witnessed one of my episodes. Min Seon set down the bottle with controlled precision. But unlike you, she didn't just watch. She tried to help. Tried to touch me, pull me out of it. I wasn't myself. I didn't know what I was doing. The words hung heavy in the air between them. You hurt her, Ella said quietly. I nearly killed her. No emotion touched his voice, but his hands curled into fists at his sides. Broke 3 ribs, fractured her jaw, strangled her until her bodyguard pulled me off. When I came back to myself, she was unconscious and bleeding. She woke up 2 days later and hasn't spoken since. Just stares at walls and screams when anyone male comes near her. Ella's stomach turned. Min Seon. Don't. He held up a hand, finally meeting her eyes, and what she saw there was utterly devoid of self-pity. Don't make excuses for me. Don't explain it away with trauma or psychology. I destroyed a human being because she had the misfortune of caring about me. That's not a tragedy, Miss Okonkwo. That's a pattern. A pattern. You think Mira was the first? His laugh was bitter and sharp. She was the first who survived long enough for documentation. The others were smarter. They ran before I could do permanent damage. Took settlements, signed NDAs, disappeared into normal lives where monsters like me are just cautionary tales they tell over wine. Ella forced herself to breathe through the nausea. Why are you telling me this? Because whoever sent you those messages is right. You should run. Min Seon moved closer, backing her against the mirrored wall, his eyes boring into hers with frightening intensity. I'm not a project you can fix. I'm not a wounded bird you can heal with enough patience and understanding. I'm a monster who occasionally wears a human face, and the only question is how long before you see it. I've already seen it, Ella shot back, finding courage she didn't know she possessed. Last night when you threatened to dismember Jihoon. At the gala, when you smiled at people you'd gladly destroy. When you blackmailed me with my grandmother's life. I know exactly what you are. Then why are you still here? The question came out raw, almost desperate. Because I also saw you on that floor, reliving something so terrible it broke you. Her voice softened despite herself. I saw you this morning, offering me an escape you clearly didn't want to give. Because you're not just a monster, Min Seon. You're a person who's convinced himself he's beyond saving. I am beyond saving. Maybe. Ella held his gaze. Or maybe everyone who tried before didn't actually want to save you. They wanted to fix you, so you'd be more convenient. There's a difference. Something cracked in his expression, quickly buried beneath his usual mask. He stepped back, creating distance, rebuilding walls she'd apparently damaged. The offer still stands. Escape clause. 12 months of care for your grandmother. Walk away, Miss Okonkwo. Be smarter than Mira was.
No.
You're being irrational. I'm being stubborn. Ella pushed off the wall, surprised by her own certainty. 6 months. That's what I signed up for. I don't care how many anonymous messages I get or how many horror stories someone feeds me. I made a choice. Min Seon stared at her like she was a puzzle that kept providing wrong answers to simple questions. You're going to regret this. Probably. She moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I don't think you're beyond saving. I think you're just scared of what happens if someone actually manages it. She left him standing in his gym, surrounded by mirrors that reflected him from every angle, alone with whatever demons drove him to destroy the people who got too close. Her phone buzzed as she reached her room. Another message from the same anonymous number. Your funeral. Don't say I didn't warn you. Ella deleted it without responding, turned off her phone, and tried very hard not to think about a woman named Mia who'd made the same choice and lost her mind for it. The restaurant was the kind of place where reservations required 3 months' notice and discretion was built into the architecture. Private rooms with soundproofing, exits that didn't appear on any floor plan, staff trained to see nothing and remember less. Min Seon had chosen it for a business dinner with a shipping magnate from Busan, and Ella had played her role perfectly for 2 hours, smiling appropriately while men discussed container routes and profit margins in careful euphemisms. She'd excused herself to the restroom, Min Seon's eyes tracking her departure with that constant vigilance she'd grown accustomed to. The hallway was empty, elegant, lined with modern art that probably cost more than most people's homes. Ella was washing her hands when the door opened behind her and a reflection appeared that didn't belong. The man was compact and efficient-looking, his suit expensive, but his eyes dead in a way that made her breath catch. He didn't say anything, just moved with frightening speed, one hand clamping over her mouth while the other caught her around the waist. Ella tried to scream, but the sound died against his palm. Tried to fight, but he was professionally trained, her struggles barely registering as he hauled her through a service door she hadn't noticed, down a concrete stairwell that smelled like grease and desperation. A van waited in the service alley, back doors open like a mouth. 2 more men inside, one holding zip ties. Reality tilted sideways as Ella was shoved into darkness, the doors slamming shut with the finality of a coffin lid. Hands, the one with zip ties, ordered in Korean. When she didn't comply fast enough, he grabbed her wrists, plastic cutting into skin as he bound them tight enough to make her fingers tingle. Someone blindfolded her with what felt like a t-shirt, and then she was pressed against the van's metal floor, heart hammering so hard she thought her ribs might crack. The van lurched into motion. Someone made a phone call in rapid Korean too fast for her limited vocabulary. She caught Min Seon's name, caught what sounded like ransom demands. Then silence except for her own ragged breathing and the city sounds filtering through metal. Time became elastic and meaningless. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour. When the van finally stopped, Ella was hauled out into what sounded like a warehouse, echo-wise space, smell of rust and old concrete. Her blindfold was ripped off, and she blinked against sudden fluorescent brightness. They were in an abandoned factory of some kind, machinery stripped out leaving only skeletal frameworks. 5 men surrounded her now, all armed, all watching her with the casual indifference of people who did this regularly. The one who seemed to be in charge, older, scarred, expensive watch, was speaking into a phone. "We have your woman, Min Seon." He switched to English, presumably for Ella's benefit. "Very pretty. It would be unfortunate if she were damaged before we could return her." A pause. "The Songdo shipment. Rerouted to our ports and she comes back to you intact. Refuse and we start sending pieces." Ella couldn't hear Min Seon's response, but whatever he said made the man's expression darken. "You have 1 hour to decide. After that, we begin negotiations differently." He ended the call, tossing the phone to one of his men. Then he smiled at Ella with all the warmth of a shark. "Let's hope your boyfriend values you more than his pride." The hour crawled past in suffocating silence. Ella's wrists ached, her shoulders screaming from the awkward position they'd forced her into, kneeling, hands bound behind her back, a gun casually pointed at her head by a man who looked bored with the entire proceedings.
She tried not to think about Mia.
About anonymous warnings. About the very real possibility that Min Seon would calculate her value against his business interests and find her wanting. Then she heard it, a sound like thunder but wrong.
Gunfire.
Screaming. The men around her scattered into defensive positions, shouting orders. weapons raised toward the warehouse entrance. The lights went out. What followed happened too fast for Ella's terrified brain to track properly. Muzzle flashes in darkness. Bodies hitting concrete. Screams that cut off with wet finality. The man guarding her grabbed her by the hair, pressing his gun to her temple, shouting something about a shield, about leverage. Then Min Seon was there. She didn't see him arrive, just suddenly registered his presence, like a force of nature manifesting in the dark. His hand closed around the guard's wrist with enough pressure to make bones crack audibly. The gun clattered away. The man's scream was brief before Min Seon's other hand found his throat. Ella squeezed her eyes shut but couldn't block out the sounds. The sick crunch of cartilage, the gurgling, the heavy thump of a body hitting ground. "Don't look." Min Seon's voice came from directly in front of her, surprisingly gentle. "Keep your eyes closed, Ella." She obeyed, feeling his hands work at the zip ties, feeling them snap free with strength that should have been impossible. Then he was lifting her, cradling her against his chest, and she made the mistake of opening her eyes. Min Seon was covered in blood. It soaked his shirt, splattered his face, dripped from his hands. In the emergency lighting that had kicked on, she could see bodies scattered across the warehouse floor. All 5 men, all very clearly dead. His eyes met hers, and they were utterly flat, emotionless, the eyes of something that had disconnected from humanity to do what needed doing. "I told you not to look," he said quietly. Then he was moving, carrying her through the carnage like she weighed nothing, stepping over bodies with the casual ease of someone navigating familiar terrain. His men appeared from the shadows, 6 of them, also blood-splattered, securing the perimeter with professional efficiency. A car waited outside, engine running. Min Seon placed Ella in the back seat with surprising gentleness, then slid in beside her, immediately pulling her back against him despite the blood, despite everything. "You're safe," he murmured against her hair. "I have you. You're safe now." Ella was shaking so hard her teeth chattered, but she couldn't make herself pull away from him. Couldn't reconcile the monster who just killed 5 men with brutal efficiency with the careful way he was holding her, like she might shatter. "You came," she heard herself whisper. "Of course I came." His hand stroked her hair, leaving bloody streaks she'd notice later. "Did you think I wouldn't? I thought you might choose the shipment." His laugh was dark and humorless. The shipment was empty, a decoy I'd been planning to sacrifice anyway. But even if it wasn't, he tilted her face up to his, and she saw something fierce and possessive burning beneath the flatness. They touched what's mine. There was never a choice to make. The drive back to the penthouse passed in a blur. Ella kept her eyes closed, pressed against Min Seon's blood-soaked chest, listening to his heartbeat, steady, controlled, completely at odds with the violence he'd just committed. She should be terrified. Should be running. Should be doing anything except finding comfort in the arms of a man who just committed multiple murders. But when they finally reached the penthouse and he carried her inside, refusing to let her walk, refusing to put her down until he'd checked every room himself, Ella felt something shift inside her chest. Something dangerous and complicated that had nothing to do with contracts or blackmail. He'd torn apart 5 men to get her back. Had looked at her with eyes that promised death to anyone who dared touch her again. And God help her, part of her had never felt safer. Ella found him on the penthouse balcony 3 hours after the warehouse, showered and changed but still carrying the weight of violence in the rigid set of his shoulders. Soul glittered below like scattered diamonds, oblivious to the blood that had been spilled in its shadows. He didn't turn when she approached, just continued staring at the city he controlled through fear and calculated brutality. "I need the truth," Ella said, wrapping her arms around herself against the night chill. "All of it. No more deflections or clinical explanations. If I'm staying, I need to understand what I'm staying for." "You should be sleeping," the doctor said. "I don't care what the doctor said." She moved to stand beside him, gripping the railing. "You killed 5 men tonight. Didn't hesitate, didn't flinch, just ended them. Then you held me like I was something precious. I need to know who you actually are, Min Seon. Not the monster, not the businessman. You." He was quiet for so long she thought he might refuse. Then he spoke, voice low and stripped of its usual armor. I was 7 years old when I watched my father murder my mother. The words hung in the air between them, simple and devastating. It was in our home in Pyeongchang. She discovered he was planning to consolidate power by eliminating his business partners, good men, family friends. She threatened to go to the authorities. Min Seon's knuckles whitened on the railing. He couldn't allow that. So he waited until I was home from school, made sure I was in the next room doing homework, and he strangled her with his bare hands. Ella's breath caught, but she stayed silent, letting him continue. I heard her struggling, came to see what was wrong, found him standing over her body, washing his hands in the kitchen sink like he'd just finished routine maintenance. His voice remained eerily calm, detached, like he was describing someone else's trauma. There was so much blood from where she'd hit her head falling. It pooled on the marble, expensive Italian marble she'd chosen herself. He looked at me and said, "Your mother had an accident. You will tell the police exactly that." Min Seon. I did what he ordered. Told the police she slipped. 7 years old, and I became an accomplice to matricide because I was too terrified to do otherwise. He finally turned to face her, and his eyes held decades of carefully controlled anguish. The episode started that night. First one happened during the funeral. I was standing beside the casket, and suddenly, I wasn't 7 anymore. I was back in that kitchen, trying to wake her up, begging her to stop pretending. Ella's throat tightened, but she forced herself to listen, to bear witness to what he was trusting her with. They've never stopped. Therapy, medication, experimental treatments, nothing works. The triggers are unpredictable. Intimacy, stress, sleep deprivation. Sometimes nothing at all, just my brain deciding it's time to relive the worst moment of my existence. His jaw clenched. I learned to hide it, manage it, keep people at enough distance that they wouldn't see. Built walls so high nothing could reach me. Until Ji-high, Ella prompted gently. Min Seon's expression darkened. Until Ji-high. I was 23, stupid enough to think I could have something normal. She was beautiful, charming, from a good family. I thought I loved her. He laughed bitterly. I told her about the episodes after 6 months together. She seemed understanding, supportive. Said she wanted to help me heal. But she didn't. She wanted leverage. The words came out flat, emotionless. She was my father's plant. He'd sent her to assess whether I was becoming a liability. Every episode she witnessed, she documented. Recorded audio, took photographs, compiled evidence of my instability to use if I ever challenged his control of the syndicate. Ella felt sick. That's monstrous. That's strategic. She played her role perfectly for 2 years. Made me believe someone could actually love the broken parts of me, then use those parts as weapons. Min Seon's hands curled into fists. When I discovered the truth, I ended it. She went back to my father with her documentation, and he's been holding it over me ever since. One wrong move, and the entire underworld sees proof that the heir to Baekho is psychologically compromised. So you've been trapped, Ella said quietly. Controlled by the same man who murdered your mother. I've been surviving. He turned back to the city view, shoulders rigid. Building my own power base, waiting for the right moment to break free. But people like me don't get happy endings, Ella. We get revenge if we're lucky, or we get destroyed if we're not. What about Miare? The question came out softer than intended. Min Seon flinched almost imperceptibly. Miare was collateral damage. A socialite my father pushed at me during a merger negotiation. I tried to keep distance, but she was persistent. Showed up at the penthouse uninvited one night when I was in the middle of an episode. His voice dropped. She thought she could help. Tried to touch me, hold me. I wasn't seeing her. I was seeing my father. When I came back to myself, she was unconscious and I had her blood on my hands. That's not your fault, isn't it? He whirled to face her, eyes blazing with something between anger and desperation. I knew what I was. I knew the danger. I should have sent her away the first time she showed interest, should have been crueler, should have protected her from myself. Instead, I was selfish enough to enjoy the attention, and she paid the price. You can't live your entire life isolated because of something that might happen. Yes, I can. I have been. Min Seon moved closer, his intensity almost overwhelming. That's what you don't understand, Ella. Everyone who gets close to me gets destroyed. My mother, Mira, the others I've hurt in smaller ways. Tonight you were taken because of me, nearly killed because someone wanted to use you as leverage. This is what my life is, an endless cycle of violence and collateral damage. Then why did you come for me? Ella challenged. If I'm just collateral damage, why risk your men, your operation, everything to get me back? The question seemed to break something in him. His carefully maintained composure cracked, revealing raw confusion beneath. I don't know. I should have calculated the cost, weighed the options, made the strategic choice. Instead, I just reacted. The moment I got that call, nothing else mattered except getting you back safely. Because you care about me. Because I'm selfish and broken and apparently incapable of learning from past mistakes. But there was no conviction in his denial. You should run, Ella. Take the out, sign the NDA, disappear into a normal life where monsters like me are just stories. Because I can promise you right now, if you stay, I will hurt you. Maybe not physically, maybe not intentionally, but I will damage you in ways that don't heal. Ella studied him in the city lights, this man who'd revealed his deepest wounds and was now begging her to leave for her own protection. She thought about Mira in her hospital bed, about anonymous warnings, about 5 bodies in a warehouse. Thought about every rational reason to walk away. Then she reached for his hand. Min Seon stared at their joined hands like it was a trap he couldn't identify. What are you doing? I'm not going anywhere, Ella said simply. You're not listening. I heard every word. She squeezed his hand, feeling his fingers tremble slightly before he controlled it. You're broken and dangerous and probably going to hurt me in ways I can't predict. But you're also the man who tore apart 5 armed men to save me. Who offer me an escape clause even though you didn't want me to take it. Who's terrified that caring about someone makes you weak. It does make me weak. Maybe. Or maybe it makes you human. Ella stepped closer, maintaining eye contact even though her heart hammered. I'm not Mira. I'm not Jihai. I'm not going to document your episodes or run when things get difficult or expect you to be something you're not. I'm just going to stay. For 6 months, he said, but it sounded like a question. For 6 months, she confirmed. And then we'll see. Min Seon pulled his hand away, turning back to the railing, but she saw his expression in the reflection, confusion, hope, terror all warring for dominance. You're going to regret this decision. Probably, Ella agreed. But it's mine to make. They stood in silence as Soul breathed below them, 2 damaged people who'd somehow found each other in the worst possible circumstances, both terrified of what came next but unable to walk away. Finally, Min Seon spoke, voice barely audible. Thank you. For staying. Ella didn't respond, just moved to stand beside him again, their shoulders not quite touching but close enough to feel the warmth. Close enough to matter. The week following Ella's confession that she was staying had been unexpectedly peaceful, or as peaceful as life with Min Seon could be. He'd been different, not softer exactly, but more present. He'd started eating breakfast with her instead of disappearing into his office before dawn. Had asked about her grandmother's recovery instead of just receiving reports from his staff. Had even smiled once, genuine and unguarded, when she'd made a sarcastic comment about his obsessively organized closet. Ella had started to believe that maybe, impossibly, they could find something resembling normal in the wreckage of how they'd begun. Then Jihai walked through the penthouse door, like she'd never left. Ella was curled on the sofa reading when she heard the private elevator chime, the one that required biometric authorization Min Seon had never mentioned giving to anyone else. She looked up as a woman emerged, and her first thought was that this person was so beautiful it seemed almost artificial. Delicate features, porcelain skin, hair that fell in perfect waves past her shoulders, designer dress that probably cost more than Ella's entire wardrobe combined. Her second thought was that this woman looked at her with the casual disdain of someone assessing an insect. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe to Mystic Tale by Luna and comment where you're watching from. You must be the new pet. Jihai's English carried a British boarding school accent, polished and cutting. Ella, isn't it? The art curator he's playing house with. Ella stood slowly, instinct screaming danger, even though the woman appeared unarmed and unthreatening. I don't think we've been introduced. No, we haven't. How rude of Min Seon, not to mention me. Jihai moved further into the space with the confidence of someone who knew every corner intimately. I'm Jihai, his ex-fiancé. Though ex is such a limiting term, don't you think? The name hit Ella like physical impact. This was the woman Min Seon had loved, had trusted, who'd betrayed him to his father, who'd documented his episodes like they were evidence at a crime scene. He's not here, Ella managed, keeping her voice steady. He's at a meeting in Gangnam. I know exactly where he is. I have his calendar. Jihai settled onto the sofa Ella had just vacated, crossing her legs with practiced elegance. I'm not here to see him, darling. I'm here to see you. Why? Because you're making things complicated. Jihai pulled out her phone, scrolling through it with manicured nails. Min Seon has been different lately, distracted. His father has noticed. I've been asked to assess the situation and resolve it. Ella's mouth went dry. Resolve it how? That depends on you. Jihai looked up, her smile sharp as glass. You seem like a smart woman. Surely you've realized by now that whatever you think you have with Min Seon is temporary. He doesn't do relationships. He does transactions. You're serving a purpose, public appearance, perhaps a tax break, maybe just convenient companionship. But the moment you become inconvenient, you don't know anything about us. Don't I? Jihai's laugh was musical and cruel. I know him better than you ever will. I know about the episodes, the nightmares, the moments when he looks at you and sees his dead mother. I know he's terrified of hurting you, but too selfish to let you go. I know that guilt and fear are eating him alive, and eventually, they'll consume you too. He told me about you, Ella said, finding her spine. About how you betrayed him. How you recorded his trauma, like it was leverage. Betrayal? Jihai tilted her head, genuinely seeming to consider the word. Is it betrayal to protect someone from themselves? Min Seon is sick, Ella. Genuinely, dangerously unstable. His father asked me to monitor him because the family was concerned. I did what needed to be done. You exploited his vulnerability. I documented reality. Jihai stood, moving toward Ella with predatory grace. And speaking of reality, did Min Seon tell you what happened to the last woman he loved? Really tell you? Not the sanitized version about Miare's unfortunate accident. Ella's heart hammered. He told me he hurt her during an episode. That she's in a facility. Did he tell you he kept hurting her? Jihai pulled up something on her phone. That the first incident wasn't the last? That she stayed, just like you're staying, convinced she could save him? That it took 3 separate hospitalizations before her family finally got a restraining order. She turned the phone toward Ella. Medical records, photographs that made bile rise in Ella's throat, bruises in the shape of handprints, a face swollen beyond recognition, hospital admission forms spanning 6 months. This is what love looks like with Min Seon, Jihai said softly. Broken bones and trauma wards, and eventually, if you're lucky, escape. If you're not lucky... She swiped to another photo, Miare in her hospital bed, vacant-eyed and destroyed. Ella's hands shook. Why are you showing me this? Because I'm giving you a chance he never gave Miare. A chance to leave before he destroys you. Jihai pocketed her phone. I can make it easy. His father will ensure your grandmother receives care for the rest of her life. You'll be compensated generously for your time. All you have to do is disappear. Tonight. No goodbyes, no explanations. Just walk away and let Min Seon return to the life he understands. And if I refuse? Jihai's expression hardened into something cold and calculating. Then I'll be forced to take more direct action. Min Seon's father has been very clear. You're a distraction that's making his son weak. Distractions can be eliminated. The threat was delivered with a casual tone of someone discussing weather. You're threatening to kill me? Ella said, her voice surprisingly steady. I'm threatening to remove an obstacle. How that removal occurs depends entirely on your cooperation. Ji-hai moved toward the elevator, then paused. You have 24 hours to decide. Disappear voluntarily, and everyone wins. Stay, and I'll show you exactly what happens to women who think they can save Min Seon from himself. The elevator doors opened. Ji-hai stepped inside, then turned back with a smile that never reached her eyes. Did he tell you what happened to the last woman he loved? I mean really loved, before me? She didn't wait for an answer. His mother. She tried to save him from his father too. Look how that ended. The doors closed on her perfect, terrible smile. Ella stood frozen in the empty penthouse, Ji-hai's words echoing in her mind. The images from those medical records burned into her retinas. Her phone buzzed, a text from Min Seon saying his meeting was running late. He'd be home in 2 hours, asking if she'd eaten. Such a normal text from such an abnormal life. Ella looked around the penthouse that had become her gilded cage, thought about Mireille's broken body and Ji-hai's cold threats and Min Seon's confession that everyone who got close to him ended up destroyed. 24 hours to decide whether to run or stay. 24 hours to choose between survival and whatever this dangerous, complicated thing between her and Min Seon had become. She sank onto the sofa, pulled out her phone, and stared at Min Seon's text for a long time before finally typing back, I'm fine.
See you soon.
But as she hit send, she couldn't stop seeing Mireille's vacant eyes, couldn't stop hearing Ji-hai's warning, couldn't stop wondering if staying was bravery or just a different kind of suicide.